Gordon.
Streaming.
Oh, okay.
And
that's fine. That's fine. I wasn't sure.
All right, and we're live.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the Gamblin Gauchos. We're here. Your favorite UT Abilene podcast. Is that a thing? Abilene Christian's a college.
Abilene Christian. I think UT Arlington is UT.
Kyle is University of Texas muted as hell on this stream.
No, I did that on purpose. I was talking to somebody else in the room here.
Yeah.
No, we actually play Abilene Christian this year, so that should be fun.
Yeah.
Our former defensive coordinator is our head coach. They've
Yikes.
Rob got like 3 or 4 former players.
7?
7? Okay, 3 or 4 or 7.
I think they have 6. They had 7.
3 plus 4 is 7.
Yeah.
Math.
They do math in Iowa. If you're listening later, not on the live stream, this is Levi Stevenson.
Yeah.
Are you with Wide Right Natty Light?
Yes.
I forgot to look at where you were from. I knew it in my heart, but I didn't want to be wrong.
Well, yes, I am from Wide Right Natty Light.
All right, we're going to talk a little Iowa State foosball today. First, what do you think of the bit online about Matt Campbell leaving every job opening?
Honestly, we haven't really it's not really like a thing anymore. I think people have finally gotten to the point now where a combination of we had a couple rough season a couple seasons ago, so people just kind of cooled off on him generally. But then 2, I think we're to the point now where he's in season 9 at Iowa State. And I mean, next year will be a decade at Iowa State for Matt Campbell. If he's not leaving for any old job now, he's obviously not just leaving for any job now. I think that's pretty well established up to this point. Like, if you're the same person that would be like, oh, Matt Campbell's going to leave as soon as he can type of thing. If you're still trying to make that point, then you are also still making the point that the Big 12 is an air raid offense league, which is just not the case. It just hasn't been for a decade.
I have to say, I feel like the reaction from Iowa State fans, because we pretty much do it every job opening, we'll Photoshop him into
I know
team's gear.
Yeah.
And the reaction from Iowa State fans is so dependent on which school or entity we're attaching him to.
Okay. I forgot when you said the bit. I forgot that you guys did that. I always remember seeing it, but I forgot that it was you guys that were always doing that. Okay, the bit is funny. I appreciate the bit that you guys do. That's funny.
I mean, it's a lot of people. It's not just us. But there'll be some schools or jobs we attach them to, and Iowa State fans are like, "This is getting old. Cut this out. It's not even funny anymore." And then Team USA fires Greg Berhalter, and we're like,
"Yeah,
Matt
we're like Matt Campbell."
They're like, "Oh, bravo!"
Yeah,
this is so funny. Keep up
the more visceral reaction you get from an Iowa State fan, the more scared they are about that actually happening.
Right. I think that's a good way to.
That's exactly what it is.
We have a comment here from Matt Campbell impersonator. I love the bit. It's always fun to respond.
It is. It is fun. Yes, it is fun.
There's also an Iowa State fan that counters us every single post and says no, actually Joey McGuire is the leading candidate, or actually Joey McGuire is going to take that job.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Yeah. You got to have a counterbalance. Everything has to have its balancing point in the universe.
For sure. Well, let's talk about Iowa State. So we're doing you are the latest iteration of this offseason series where we talk to somebody who covers every team on Texas Tech's Big 12 schedule. There's so many teams now, we won't get to all of them, so we're only focusing on the ones that truly matter. Looking back at last
you guys aren't
season,
talking to TCU? No.
Unfortunately, I have to say they matter because they're on our schedule.
Sorry, so. Jamie and Melissa, if you're listening to this, I'm very sorry. I just had to throw that in there. They're my friends.
Help me make sense of Iowa State last year, because y'all were one of the weirdest teams in the country. I mean, y'all got bit by the same snake that Tech, Baylor, Cincinnati, we all lost to a group of 5 school, Oklahoma State for that matter.
Yep.
Come out pretty bad out of the gates. And then y'all beat Oklahoma State in a game that I thought at the time was okay, the loser of this game might be the worst team in the Big 12. And then the loser of that game plays in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, it turns out both teams ended up being pretty decent.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what clicked after you get Northern Iowa, FCS, but started 1-3 against FBS opponents. What changed after that allowed y'all to finish the season so strong?
I mean, It helps when you get more games and more snaps under the belt of your redshirt freshman quarterback that wasn't originally supposed to start the season. Obviously, with Hunter Deckers being forced out in the whole gambling thing last year, then Rocco takes over, and frankly, up through the Ohio game, it was 100% a matter of them trusting Rocco. That was the entire thing. That was the reason if you don't go back and watch the Ohio game, but just trust me on this. It happened in the Ohio game that they were insistent on running the ball and running and running and running. They just could not do it, and they just kept doing it for some reason. I think it was mainly because they just really didn't trust Rocco to really orchestrate the offense. But as they loosened the leash up they lengthened the leash up for Rocco throughout the season, we saw the offense open up quite a bit more, and we started to see a lot more of what the team can be when it's not hamstrung by an offensive line that can't run block very well at all, and an insistence on continuing to run the ball despite that. So that's really, I think, mainly what it was, is you saw the offense really take a good step forward as Rocco got comfortable and as the staff got comfortable with Rocco.
How about the late surge from the young running backs?
Abu Sama. Oh.
I think 8 yards a carry, 7.5 yards.
Something stupid. Yeah.
A massive game against Kansas State.
And he had a good game against BYU too.
BYU, late surge for sure. Is that also the running game, the offensive line all meshing late, or?
That's an actual true freshman running back, and in general, freshmen need a couple games just to kind of get up and get to the speed of the college game. But as he got more comfortable and got up to speed with the college game, and as they let Rocco go a little bit more, when you're not trying to just incessantly run the ball inside zone between the A gaps all the time, it's a lot easier to run the ball. And when you have the defense has to, account for Jaden Higgins and stuff like that, some space opened up for Abu to be able to do his thing. And like you said, we really saw that in the BYU and Kansas State games. But in general, throughout the end of the season, he was just generally very good and appears to be the next in line of Matt Campbell's long list of very good running backs.
Let's talk about some of the other weapons. You alluded to a couple of them there, but Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, both coming back. What else do y'all have at the skill position? And we'll talk about quarterback and O-line playing a little bit. Yeah. I don't think weapons are kind of the first thing that comes to mind for Iowa State offenses, but I think y'all actually have quite a few.
Oh, it's at the skill positions. Iowa State is as deep as it's probably ever been in program history, I would say. Jaden Higgins is a full bore, like, all-American candidate at wide receiver, like probably even a fringe, he's probably a fringe Blitnikoff, contender. It'll depend on for him. It'll to win that, you have to have a lot of volume. Like the guys that win Blitnikoff typically are like really high volume pass catchers, which Iowa State has produced in the past. If you look at Xavier Hutchinson, was a huge volume receiver. Part of that was because he really didn't have a lot of help, but Jaden has Jalen Noel across from him and in the slot next to him and stuff like that. And that's a wide receiver tandem that is it's in the top tier in the Big 12 as far as a 1-2 punch at receiver. It's a combo that a lot of teams would like to have. Jaden Higgins, I've heard a lot of talk as being an early day 2 pick in the draft in the next spring, because he's got a ton of size. He's like 6'3", 6'4". He's quick. He runs good routes. Pretty much everything you're looking for in a receiver. Jalen Noel is kind of your prototypical slot guy. Very fast, good vertical threat too. But besides those two guys, there's a kind of a smattering of people that have a couple transfers that have come in. A lot of guys that have shown out, have shown bursts of some really nice tools. One that last year that we saw a little bit of toward right at the end of the season in the Memphis game, especially. His name is Benny Nagoye. He's 6'4". He got clocked. Supposedly he got clocked in high school. I think it's a pretty legit time. He got clocked in high school at a 4.39 coming out of, and he ran like a 10.5 or something like that in the 100. He set the Nebraska state record in the long jump. He's an unbelievably good athlete. And for him, it's just kind of he hasn't played football for a long time, so it's getting route running and stuff like that. But it's one of those that if or when the lights come on, he's going to be a monster. You're looking at a transfer coming from Army, Isaiah Alston. Obviously, coming from Army, they don't throw the football a lot, but he averaged like 20-something yards a catch last year. He was basically a deep threat for them. He's a vertical threat in this offense, absolutely. Another guy he's been good when he's been healthy in his career. Daniel Jackson he's from San Antonio. He's been a nice route running type receiver, nice possession receiver. At Iowa State when he's been healthy, he's had some injury problems throughout his career, but if he can stay healthy, I think he's a very, very nice third option beyond Nolan Higgins. They've got a ton of options at receiver, and then obviously Iowa State likes to use lots of tight ends, and there's lots of great options there too. At running back behind Sam, you've got Carson Hansen, who's kind of I hate to use his comp because he's a white running back, but he really is kind of a Christian McCaffrey type where they like to split him out and he's a receiving back, and Christian McCaffrey's just the prototype for that. But
I see some Toby Gerhart in him as well, I think. Just because he's another white running back.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Toby's kind of a Mike Allstott kind of running back.
Yeah, Mike Allstott, Toby Gerhart. If you put him in the slot,
he's
he looks
somewhere in between Christian McCaffrey and Mike Allstott. He's somewhere in there. Yeah.
Can he play in the slot like Wes Welker, Danny Amendola?
Yeah, real gym rat. Yeah.
Grit.
But anyway, so he's kind of their utility guy. It wouldn't shock me a lot to see them both on the field at the same time, especially if you see Hansen lined up in the slot and then they'll motion him into the backfield or something like that. Dylan Lee and Jalen Jennings are behind them. Jalen Jennings is like 5'6", like kind of a Deuce Vaughn, maybe taller than Deuce Vaughn, but not much bigger. And then Dylan Lee's a freshman out of Arizona that's looks really impressive. I mean, his high school tape is every bit as good as Breece Hall's was, and Breece Hall's high school tape is very, very good. We'll see. I mean, he's just a true freshman, but his size and his talent look the part of another very good running back. So I would say it's got lots and lots of weapons, and obviously Rocco proved himself to be a very competent quarterback last year and should take a big step forward going into his sophomore year. But as you mentioned before, and we can probably just go into it now, is that the entire question for Iowa State on offense is and always will be until further notice the offensive line.
So you mentioned all those wide receivers. I have one more. Eli Green from North Dakota State.
Eli Green from North Dakota State is another one that I think he'll factor into the rotation. I think he's a really nice player.
We had 1,200 yards all purpose
last
year.
Yeah, he's a nice player. I think there's a couple. I mean, there's a bunch more guys you could bring up at receiver too. They're just incredibly deep at that position this year. Dominic Overby is a 6'5" freshman out of Utah. He was kind of a sleeper pick, and he just jumped up into like a low 4-star or like a 90 overall in 247 just kind of out of nowhere. After Iowa State had already committed to him, and he's a state champion in long jump and 100-meter dash. He set the 100-meter record at 10.54 and the 200-meter at 20.91 and long jump 23.11 at 6'5". He's not quite the tall redwood that Matt Campbell used to like to get with Alan Hazard and Akeem Butler and stuff like that, but much more of the still above average height, but more a better athlete like Jayden Higgins, Xavier Hutchinson, that kind of receiver. So he's kind of in that same mold. I don't know how much he'll play. He's a true freshman, but I've heard very good things about him from camp. There's another guy, Kai Black, is a redshirt freshman from Urbandale that looks really good. I mean, they've got lots of options there. And then obviously the tight ends along with them. Ben Bramer is maybe the best tight end in the Big 12, or certainly the conversation for it.
True sophomore.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to that offensive line. I was looking at
do we have to
at our lads because I like to see who's projected, and it's not always accurate, but redshirt junior, redshirt senior, redshirt junior, true sophomore, redshirt senior.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always mean that you're better when you're older. A lot of those guys transfers or just guys who didn't play much and then finally get their opportunities. But it does feel good to maybe have at least one guy who's good enough to play early and then some age at least there in the offensive line. Do you think it'll be better this year?
I mean, I think it will be, but I've also thought that for like the last 5 years, and it just didn't get better. Now, like last year they started coming on towards the end of the season. Like James Neal had a good finish to the season. Brendan Black is the true sophomore who played a lot as a true freshman last year. He came in like around the Ohio game, I think is when he started playing a lot. When Ryan Clanton came in as the offensive line coach last year, his whole thing is violence. We're gonna have good technique, but first priority is we're gonna look this dude in the face and tell you I'm putting you on your ass before you have a chance to do anything, and being physical and like effing people up type of thing. That's the mentality that Ryan Clanton wants to approach, and which I think, from what I kind of my understanding, is that was kind of a pretty stark contrast from the last regime, where at times the offensive line looked kind of soft. And I think and some of that is just getting the right guys in there. That's the reason Brendan Black played a lot last year. Looked like a true freshman, kind of was in some, and not necessarily always in the right spot all the time, and his technique was sometimes a little rough, but the kid plays hard, and that's a building block that Ryan Clanton can build on. And I think part of it last year too, you had a couple injuries, like Dalen Hazard was a lineman that was coming in. I think that was projected to maybe even be starting at left tackle potentially, and then he tore his Achilles during fall camp. So that'll be a guy that's back. You get a really important offensive line transfer from Princeton, Jalen Travis, who I think a lot of people think he has a chance to be a high pick in the draft, like a day 2 pick or something like that, if he plays well this year, because he's like 6'9", I think. He's obviously went to Princeton, very smart guy. I think they project him as the starting left tackle. So if you have him and then Tyler Miller at right tackle, Iowa State's 2 tackles are 6'9". It's a very, very big offensive line now. Fortunately, gone are the days where Iowa State's trucking out like 6'4" at tackle and 6 foot even at center, and we're just hoping and praying. Now we're at 6'9" at both tackle positions, probably 6'5" at the guards, and probably 6'4" at center. It's a gigantic offensive line.
And you said he transferred in from Princeton?
Princeton, yep.
That's interesting because they call Texas Tech Princeton on the Plains. Let's talk quarterback position. You mentioned Rocco Beck. I think ultimately a good debut season, maybe slow out of the gates. But like you said, once he found his footing. Now, tell me if I'm wrong here. I view him as a very high floor quarterback that maybe doesn't have the ceiling of some other playmakers at that position. Is that an accurate assessment of him, or are y'all expecting him to maybe reach a new level this year?
So he is very similar to Brock Purdy in his play style is very similar to Brock Purdy. He's not going to like run for $150 on you or something like that, but he's plenty mobile enough to be a good improviser on the run. He can pick up a few yards when he needs to, that type of thing. I will say, as a freshman, he was far more, I don't want to say composed, but he was less turnover prone and less risk prone than freshman Brock Purdy was. If he follows generally Brock Purdy's progression as a quarterback, that obviously bodes well for him. I think he's a very accurate guy. He's very smart. He's good on the road because he's a composed guy that doesn't get rattled very easily. I think, like you said, high floor guy for sure. We'll see about ceiling. I mean, he's like 6 foot 6'1". I mean, he's not like some big 6'5" guy with a huge laser rocket arm or anything like that. So maybe that limits his ceiling a little bit, but we said all that exact same stuff about Brock Purdy, and then he turned out to be a very good college quarterback and is now, maybe or arguably a top 10 quarterback in the NFL right now. So modern offenses are designed to be able to function well without Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever, have these guys that have incredible arms and ridiculous arm talent. You can still have a very good offense and be a very good quarterback while having, average or above average tools, as long as you're smart. And Rocco is a very smart quarterback, just like Brock Purdy was. So I think his ceiling as a college quarterback is probably about as high as he wants it to be. Not necessarily because he's some overwhelming athlete, but because he's just a very smart, very, very smart and composed kid.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I mean, I know Iowa State maybe doesn't have the same pass volume as some other offenses, but 8 interceptions for anybody who starts and plays the entire season is pretty remarkable, especially for a freshman.
Yeah.
I
mean, well, and if you look at the bowl game, he set the single game passing record as a redshirt freshman in the bowl game. Wow. So, yeah. It's pretty impressive what he did last year, honestly, especially given the circumstances too, going into July and August, there was so many things just going on around the program, and he didn't know if he was going to play. And from what I understand, it was him and JJ Cole were like in the battle until like the week before the game. type of thing. Like, so true freshman JJ Cole was pushing him. So, having all of that and having all that adversity, losing maybe, an offensive line that was maybe going to start, having all the gambling thing, trying to have it start as a redshirt freshman, he had a lot of pressure on him. And I couldn't have been prouder of how he handled it and how he improved throughout he did. His freshman season is exactly how every football coach in America would love their true freshman quarterback to progress throughout a season.
For sure. Let's flip to the other side of the ball and talk defense a little bit. Iowa State almost always has a great defense. We'll start up front in the trenches. What do y'all have along the defensive line coming back or maybe incoming via the transfer portal?
Yeah.
So we'll go to the other position groups.
The defensive line is definitely one of the biggest positions of strength on the field. To the point where I've heard some not insignificant rumblings that they're looking at running more 4-down fronts this year, and they're not getting away from the 3-3 stack because it's just so good. It's just so effective, but running more 4-down fronts because you look last year, they needed to get more pressure on the quarterback. That was of a defense that was otherwise still very, very good. That was by far the biggest fault, was not getting to the quarterback consistently. So in order to do that and take advantage of the personnel you've got Tyler Onyedem and Joey Peterson, very, very good defensive ends on the outside. Then you've got J.R. Singleton in the middle, and there's a lot of names here that are really, really interesting. Kennard, I don't know if I'm assuming you guys have been playing College Football 25.
I have. Kyle has not.
Secret banger in that game, Kennard Snyder. If you when I playing on an All-American season with me never actually playing as him, Kennard Snyder went for 27 sacks on my All-American difficulty season. I never played as Kennard Snyder. AI Kennard Snyder went for 27 sacks on All-American.
He's an end and edge.
He's an edge rusher.
All right.
Or he's an end. I don't know. I don't think he's going to do 27 sacks this year, but very good name, and he's kind of a secret. Actually, Iowa State in general is a really fun team. We don't need to get into that, but Iowa State's a really fun team to play with on that. Jaden Higgins is cheating. But anyways, so you've got Joey Peterson, Ikene Eziogu, who played a bunch last year. Trent Jones played a lot. Samuel Same did. Zymir Hawk is the guy that we've heard a ton about. He would be like a nose tackle type of thing, defensive tackle on the interior. Heard a lot about Zymir Hawk in the offseason. But yeah, you get J.R. Singleton and Dominique Orange in there, which is that's a very good 1-2 punch. If you can have Onyedem, Orange, Singleton, and Joey Peterson as your defensive line, having all four of them on the field at the same time, that is a very stout and potent defensive line, either as a run stopping unit or as a pass rushing unit. And there's lots of depth behind them too. This is probably Iowa State's best defensive line as an overall group that they've had under Matt Campbell. They don't have Will McDonald, but they've got a bunch of guys behind on that run where you can run a full 8 guys deep and feel pretty good about whoever you have on the field.
When you run the 4-man front, is that more of a 4-2? Do you take this will be
I would be shocked because part of the we'll get to in a second is that Iowa State's secondary is also loaded. Okay. So you would want to run like a 4-2-5, given that the linebackers should be good, but they're not as deep as the defensive line or the secondary. So you'd want to run like an old like the Gary Patterson 4-2-5 type of thing. So you would just swap out a linebacker for an extra edge rusher. And they kind of already do that a lot with like Caleb Bacon, who is a linebacker, but also kind of a stand-up edge rusher. He was very, very good at that last year. Also another guy that if you want a secret banger on College Football 25, on his own, he'll develop into like a 95 by his senior year. But anyway, so he's kind of a very good stand-up edge rusher, kind of, Von Miller type, where he kind of functions as a DN, but he's still technically a linebacker. So they already do that kind of quite a bit anyways, but now you'll see more of a 4-down lineman 2-5 behind them if they do that. But like I said, I still think the 3-3 stack will still be their bread and butter.
Speaking of that secondary, it always seems like it's just a bunch of linebackers that run 4-4. Is it that way again? Because it's ridiculous that it's been so long that it's been happening.
Well, Bo Freeler's back again, baby, and it seems like he's one of those guys that just seems like he's been in college forever because he kind of has been. He was on the 2021 team and he played against Clemson in the bowl and stuff like that. So he's been around forever. Iowa State probably I'm honestly not trying to sound super biased here, but I'm not really sure there's an argument that Iowa State has the best safety group in the conference between Malik Verdon, Bo Freeler, and Jeremiah Cooper. Jeremiah Cooper had 5 picks on his own last year, and then Freeler and Malik Verdon both combined for another 5. And that was with Malik Verdon only playing like 9 games or something like that. That is an outstanding group of safeties. And John Haycock's defenses are always very dependent on safeties. They always rack up lots and lots. Bo Freeler will probably, maybe the leading tackler on the team this year, just because that's how they stop the run, is they bring the safeties down and they spill the run to the outside, and then the safeties come down and get it. And they're all very good. You got a couple ball hawks back there with Malik Verdon and Jeremiah Cooper. They've got good depth on this year too, because Malik Verdon was hurt a little bit last year. So you had a lot of guys come in, like Jamison Patton is a guy that came in and played a lot last year, that you feel really good about having 5 or 6 at the top of that safety group that have starting experience, really. Cam Smith is another guy. It's a rock solid group that, right now Miles Purchase is back at corner, but the big question on the defense, I suppose, is the second corner across from Miles Purchase. So having those 3 guys back there to back up whoever is going to be at that second spot, I think is an invaluable asset.
Are y'all going to be better without TJ Tampa?
In what, Miles Purchase is not better than TJ Tampa, and the guy that's coming in to slide behind Miles Purchase is not better than TJ Tampa. However, if the safeties stay healthy, the defensive line should be better. The linebackers are all a year older. I think this is, as a defense, I think they will be better than last year.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by it. I think sometimes fan bases
lose
a guy that good and convince themselves of something crazy. Like, there were some, you'll like this as a Farmageddon guy, there were some takes out there that even though Deuce Vaughn was leaving, if you sliced up, can't remember the guy's name right now, the K-State running back coming from Florida State, there was like, well, if you look at these carries in home games, he actually averages more yards per carry than Deuce Vaughn. It was like, he's not going to be better than Deuce Vaughn.
You're not going to be able to Moneyball replacing Deuce Vaughn.
DJ Giddens.
Now, if it was Deuce Vaughn specifically when he plays Iowa State, you could replace him with a guy in a wheelchair.
There were some TCU fans doing it after they won 13 games and went to the playoff, had like 6 guys drafted. They're like, I actually think though, like, this wide receiver room without Quentin Johnson could be better. I was like, no, it's not, because he was top 20 NFL draft pick.
Like I said, Miles Purchase is a very good corner. He's got played a million games. He's a very solid corner. He's not TJ Tampa, and the guy behind him is not going to be TJ Tampa. But provided everybody stays healthy, which is obviously what all of these are based on, is Iowa State's defense as a whole, I think, will be better.
Well, that sucks for us. I mean, great for y'all.
I'm fine with it. I will never get sick of having like a top 10 defense. It's pretty great, I'll be honest.
How big
I
of a loss?
I wish the offensive line was any good, but
how big of a loss is Tyson Veit, the former Broyles Award winner, going over to Cincinnati as the defensive coordinator?
Well, this is kind of a cop-out answer, but we'll see. Because it's one, congratulations to him. It's a well-deserved opportunity over there. I mean, probably overdue. He's been, like you said, he won a Broyles Award. He's been, an outstanding linebackers coach. Because he won the Broyles Award the year that Joel Lanning came on and did his thing. And that was part of the reason he won the Broyles Award, because he taught a quarterback how to play linebacker in 1 year, and he was a really good linebacker. So he's put in his due. He's there. As far as kind of like what it looks like, I think in general, the philosophy of the defense is going to be the same with John Haycock there. They can bring in a guy that's they brought in a guy that I think they'll be able to largely continue with what they were doing. I think they're bringing in a guy to do what Tyson Veit was already doing. They're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. Iowa State's linebackers have always been solid. They're not going to try to change anything or anything like that. They'll bring in a new guy to replace him and largely try to just keep it status quo. You don't need to overhaul anything. Fortunately, he's leaving because he did a good job, not because he did a bad job.
The often forgotten about third phase of the game, special teams. Just
Yeah,
a quick question.
tell me about it. Forgotten about.
Do y'all have any field goal defense packages for like a 62-yard field goal this year or anything like that?
I was watching that game. I was like, "There's no fucking way he's making this. Shut up." And
I didn't think we were going to snap the ball. I thought we were trying to get y'all to burn the timeout.
Sorry, I cussed in your podcast, but that thing would have gone in from 70. And I was like, you know what? I can't even be mad about it. Just he got it. Whatever it is, what it is.
It's crazy.
That's kind of a cheap blow there, Kyle. After he just mentioned Joel Lanning and didn't say anything about the.
No, the mere mention of Joel Lanning's name was enough to give me PTSD.
I saw him visibly recoil when I mentioned Joel Lanning, so I
was like, oh, there's touchdown number 6 and 7, and
yeah.
Hey, Rob. I took the high road earlier when we were talking about Brock Purdy. I think he was brought up. I didn't say anything about Patrick Mahomes beating him in the Super Bowl. So
that's true. I mean, I would argue
bring that up.
I would argue that the Chiefs' defense did a lot more than Pat Mahomes, but that's just me.
Well. We only have you for 30 minutes, so I'm actually not going to take the bait on that.
I got time. No,
no, I actually, in all sincerity, kind of thought there was a chance because that was Mahomes' 4th Super Bowl to play in, and like there's something to be said for having been on that stage before.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Not only was it Purdy's first time, but it was his first full year as a starter, only his 2nd year as a pro, and I was like, there's a chance he could just crumble, and like he absolutely did. And he played really well for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, he made all of us prouder than we ever could imagine.
Yeah. Hopefully he gets one. I'm not greedy. If Mahomes retires with like 12 or 13 and Purdy wins one, that's fine with me. So,
I mean, the 49ers are set up to be good for quite a while. So, and Kyle Shanahan's an unbelievably good offensive coach. So, as long as everybody stays healthy and the 49ers front offense does a good job of keeping people around him, I have no doubt that they'll be in contention for quite a while.
Absolutely.
Let's get that defense sucks. That offensive line sucks ass though. They need to get more. They need to get some more line. I mean, like Trent Williams is great, but he's not the only. He's not the only one on that line.
Yeah. Well, let's get your season prediction. Y'all went 6-3 in conference play last year.
Yeah.
I don't remember where y'all were picked in the media poll. I think in the scrum in the middle there. There's like,
I mean, we're in the 3 to 8 scrum where everyone's like, it's just a bunch of teams.
Yeah. How do you think y'all will fare in the Big 12 standings when it's all said and done?
It's a good question. Iowa State, like when we got our schedule for this year, we initially looked at it like, oh shit, this sucks. But honestly, and we actually kind of did before last year too, but it actually turned out to be a pretty okay schedule. And I think that is actually kind of the case this year. I mean, you have to go to Houston, but I don't think Houston's going to be anything special. They're probably not going to be great. Then they got Baylor at home. Baylor's going to suck. And then Westford at Morgantown is going to be a tough one. That's a tough game. Iowa State generally plays all right in Morgantown. But that's a coin flip / slightly West Virginia lean, but certainly not a game that they can't win or anything like that. You get UCF at home. You get Tech at home. You get Kansas and Arrowhead, which everyone's like, Kansas and Arrowhead, it's a home game. Fuck that. Kansas City's that's our turf. Kansas City is Iowa State. That's Iowa State's home field. I don't care what Kansas fans say. So I'm going to be going to the Arrowhead game. No question. And I would be willing to bet that game it might not be 50-50, but it'll be close to 50-50. I think I would be shocked if there isn't 25 or 30,000 Cyclone fans down there. Then you get Cincinnati at home. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be anything great. The only game on the schedule right now that I'm looking at is like, that's probably an L, is at Utah. Now I don't think it's not unwinnable for Iowa State. I mean, they can go to Utah and a good defense will travel. They can go on the road and beat Utah. I don't think they're gonna, but they can. And then you get Kansas State at home. You get your toughest opponents at home. You do have to go to Morgantown. You do have to go to Salt Lake City. But other than that, you're probably going to be 50-50 or better in basically all of the other games. If you get enough coin flips to go right, I mean, hell, I don't know. Maybe you're looking at 7-2. I don't know. I think this is a team that if the offensive line is still bad, they're probably a 5-4 or a 6-3 type team. If the offensive line is good and they can run the ball, I mean, pick a number. I mean, I mean, I genuinely, like I said, I'm not trying to be like overly homer, but I genuinely do believe that there's enough playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that if Rocco has time to throw and Abu Sama has room to run, I would say it's going to score a lot of points, and that defense is going to be very solid again. And I think they can win a lot of football games.
Early in June, I took Iowa State 8th in the conference. I really don't see them being worse than 5th or 4th at this point. I'm really high on Iowa State.
I think being cautiously high on Iowa State is a perfectly reasonable place to be. Obviously, there's been in the past where we've had expectations and we've just shit the bed. But I think there's plenty of reason to believe that this team has a very high ceiling, much like the 2021 team did. The 2021 team objectively underperformed quite a lot. And part of that was a lot of just kind of bad 50-50 bounces and stuff like that, which shit happens. But, if you assume a rough 50-50 split on good bounces and bad bounces, I think this is a team that has maybe just a slightly lower ceiling than that 2021 team did, which most people in 2021 were picking Iowa State as a dark horse playoff team. So, or maybe not even a dark horse team, but just a playoff team. Maybe not quite that high ceiling, but right there. Like, I think with the way the 12-team playoff set up the way it is, that like if Iowa State has again a good offensive line they put together, this is a team that I think could potentially be worthy of like an at-large bid into the playoff if things go right.
You can't say Iowa State who makes the playoff in the Big 12.
Well, I'm going to assume that there's two.
Okay.
I mean, I think as long as the runner-up, as long as the team who loses in the time isn't some like random out of nowhere team that has like they're like 0-4 in non-conference and they go 8-0 in conference or something like that. Assuming the runner-up is like 10-2 or 10-3 or something like that. I'm going to guess if it's not Iowa State, it's probably Utah and Kansas State. But there's a number of teams that wouldn't like shot. I mean, you'd be dumb to not think Oklahoma State has a shot at it. I mean, they're just always there. I mean, Texas Tech seems like a low floor, high ceiling kind of team. Like I said, I'm not as intimately familiar with Texas Tech's roster as I am Iowa State's, obviously, but like it seems like a team that could be really good, like 9-3, 10-2, or some shit could go wrong and they could be a 5-7 team pretty fast. And that's that kind of my 40,000 foot view of the team anyways. I think Iowa State's probably got a higher floor than Texas Tech, but they've probably got roughly the same ceiling. So I just, it wouldn't shock me if any of those 5 teams got in.
All right, final question, then you can tell us the people where to find you. Texas Tech, Iowa State in Ames, Jack Trice Stadium, late in the season. We'll set the total at, 24.5, because that's what the game was last time, 14-10. I do expect the offense to be better.
Probably take the over on that one.
Yeah.
God, I hope we take the over on that.
Maybe a final score.
No, I mean, I will say that Iowa State in the last couple seasons has made a habit of trying to hammer that under as best they could, but trying to do our best University of Iowa impression. But I remember, was it last year that Iowa played a game where the over under was like 19.5 or something stupid like that? I think Iowa played Northwestern, and I think the over under was like 19 or something like that. It was something stupid.
Really low.
I was like, there's a certain point where the over-under gets low enough that we have to start talking about whether or not it's violating the Geneva Convention. And I think we need to start reevaluating at that point whether it's actually legal for Iowa to play football.
I'm in for that conversation. All right, Levi, where can they find you? Where can they follow you and listen to you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, we're at WideRTNattyLT. It's WideRightNattyLite.com. We have a YouTube channel that's the same way. If anybody's not, and if anyone's on Discord and likes a good, big, healthy Big 12 conversation, and honestly, lots of other stuff too. Our Discord is like at about 1,100 members or something like that now. It's a very healthy Discord that's got a lot of good conversation going. I know Kyle's in. I don't know if Robert, if you're in it or not, but it's a good time. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you're on Discord at all. Yeah. If you're into Magic the Gathering, I've also got stuff for that too. But
we have one quick question from our Discord. They want to know if y'all's Discord channel has a political channel where people can discuss.
We do. It's private. Like, you have to request to be in it, and we maintain I wouldn't say it's not like full on like banhammery whatever, but like we keep a closer eye on it, like moderation wise. So and honestly, I've been very happy with it. I was very hesitant to make a politics channel in there for a long time because just look around. But you know, I was like, you know what? There's enough stuff going around. I think most of the people here are pretty well measured that they can have good conversation. And honestly, generally, outside of like one or two things in like the 3 years the Discord server's been up, like I said, maybe like one or two people have gotten banned, but like, which honestly, I feel is pretty good. And actually, I don't know if anyone's that got banned. I know that we put a couple people on timeout because they just needed to kind of chill out. But you know, honestly, I've been very happy with it. There's people that are very like demonstrably left leaning and either way, and I think there's good conversation in there too. So, you know, if you're interested in that type of thing and you can discuss things in a rational, level headed manner, honestly it's a very good politics chat. I will kind of brag about it. I'm actually very proud of how nice that chat is to be in at times. Actually,
that's a good thought to make people request to join. We have one, and I know people muted it like the day we created it. Who just like don't want to, and that's understandable.
We have it set to a role so that way you don't even see it if you don't like. Well, actually, maybe you can see it, but you just can't access it. I think maybe that's what it is. You can see it, but you can't access it or whatever. If you want to, you have to request access, and then at that point, we'll be like, okay, is this person normally cool or are they not? And then, you know, most people, I don't know if we've ever been like, let's not let that guy in type of thing, but
yeah.
Honestly, that's been a good way to just kind of like people that want to be in there, they can be in there. If they don't want to be involved in it, they don't have to be. I know most people are fatigued with a lot of that stuff today, but some people, I mean, some of it's still like good to talk about and conversate about and all that kind of stuff. It's good to have healthy conversation. And I think, like I said, there's enough diversity of opinion in there too, where it's definitely not an echo chamber of any sort. And so you get good conversation and it's all pretty good.
I'm pretty pleased with ours as well. Most people are well behaved.
Yeah. Well,
there are days.
We don't need to go on like a huge philosophical thing, but like it's like, you know, like I think people want more. They want to be able to talk about that stuff in a way that feels healthy.
I'd agree with that. I didn't think we were going to end it on a political note, but we covered everything else, and appreciate you joining us. That was great insight. I hate that we're going up there in November instead of like, you know, mid.
You guys are welcome up. We got Busch Light waiting for you.
I'll come if it's like first half of October or earlier, especially when is Sci-Town finished yet?
Oh, it won't be done for 5 years probably.
Oh, dang. Okay,
I mean, like they're like the parking lots are redone and stuff like that, but like it's not like there's not like buildings up or anything.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely coming when Sci-Town is ready to go.
Fair enough.
Levi, thank you for joining us. Best of luck in 11 out of 12 games this year. And maybe we'll talk to you again during the season.
Hopefully. Maybe we'll see each other in Dallas. That'd be cool.
Oh, yeah. I'll take that.
Honestly, an Iowa State Texas Tech Big 12 championship game would be that'd kind of slap. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd be a good time. Like, would the national media give a shit about it? No. Would it be fun? Hell yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say it's actually got a pretty good alumni base down in Dallas. I think it's probably outside of Kansas City. It's the second biggest alumni center. Interesting. Yeah.
I moved to DFW about a year and a half ago. I don't know if I've seen a ton of Cyclone stuff, but there's so much in a place like DFW.
It's a huge metro. Yeah.
Yeah. You see like Georgia Tech and like, I mean,
so you'll see stuff from everywhere, but I think DFW is Iowa State's second largest alumni base outside of Kansas City and outside of Iowa.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Best of luck this season. We'll be watching the Cyclones, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
That was Levi Stevenson of Wide Right Natty Light. Thanks for joining us again. I will say I am on record as saying Iowa State is a dark horse contender for the Big 12 championship. Matt Campbell, man, I like the guy. I do. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a credible Big 12 mind. Not incredible, but credible. I think he's done a lot of good in his career. Obviously, there at Iowa State, beyond everyone else there, he's the best coach in the school's history. Low bar, but can he get over the hump? Can he produce a team that wins 10 games?
Yeah, and I feel like even the good Iowa State teams have some terrible, inexplicable loss, or at least like close call. Like I think the COVID year, I can't remember if they lost to ULala or almost lost. I think they lost to them, and then just go on. Like the next week they beat a top 5 OU team, and so they're a very, I don't know, high highs, low lows kind of squad where I feel like you can never write them off because they can do something like lose to Ohio and start 1-3 and then like finish 6-3. I don't know. They're always a tough out, but like you're saying, they don't. I won't believe that they can string together like an 8-1 conference season, 10-2, 11-1 season until they do it. They'll always be a team that is capable of that and can like beat the best teams on their schedule, but then they'll just have some like horrible losses even in some of their best seasons ever. So, but I do think they are going to be a tough out this year.
Was it Kansas last year? They missed like 4 field goals and lost 11-9 or something.
I think that was 2 years ago. Yeah,
2 years ago. That's the classic Iowa State game.
They lost. I'm pretty sure they lost.
They'll beat Prime Oklahoma.
I'm pretty sure they lost to Kansas State that same year, 10-9.
Yeah.
There's just games like that. It's like, hey, put together one scoring drive, make one field goal, and then then they'll like play Texas, who's like in the top 10, and like force overtime or something. It's like, what is this team? So I'd be lying if I said I just love how it feels going up there in November to play them. I don't know what kind of team they'll be, just because of how enigmatic they've been in the past. But I can't imagine that is going to be a ton of fun, even if they're not one of Campbell's best teams. I feel like they're still tough in Ames that late in the season.
All right, I want to throw an e-break here and go back to politics for a second.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Nick Castellanos, the right fielder?
Yes.
Okay. He hits home runs every time something big happens.
Every time.
There is a definitive list now of times that Nick Castellanos has hit a home run. We don't talk a lot of Major League Baseball here, but I'm going to talk about this quickly. The first one was Tom Berneman saying the slur on a hot mic. By the way, he's back with the CW. So during the apology, he hits a home run, and that's the famous now with the deep drive. What is it? I fashioned myself as a man of God, and now deep to left field. Nick Castellanos home run. Career-threatening injury for Tatis. It's a home run. Right after a eulogy for a World War II veteran. It's a home run. After a 9/11 tribute video package was played on the air. It's a home run. During an apology of an opposing team's coach getting a DUI. Home run. 10 minutes after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Home run. The day of Dwayne Haskins' death. Home run. Right after a Memorial Day tribute package was played on air. Right after the eulogy for the just deceased PA announcer for the stadium. Home run. After a cancer announcement for the team's owner. After Vin Scully's death announcement. An hour after the death of Queen Elizabeth passed. A bridge collapsed, killing several people. Home run. The Ocean Gate submarine explosion. Home run. 3 other celebrity death home runs. 2 home runs on the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The home run on the day of the assassination attempt on Trump. And then today, Biden withdraws from the race. Home run Castellanos.
It's honestly amazing to follow it in real time now. It has entrenched itself as such a meme. Like, there's a segment of the internet that when something happens, like Trump gets shot or Biden drops out, they're like, hey, Nick Castellanos anytime home run odds are plus 450. And then like an hour later it happens without fail. Today it was hilarious. I'm pretty sure this was photoshopped. But like DraftKings or somebody took Nick Castellanos anytime home run off the board after the Biden announcement. And I don't know if that was like, publicity stunt.
Yeah.
I saw others that were like, they were limiting, I think you could only bet like $1,100 on it, which sometimes they're just small limits on prop bets. But you actually forgot the very first one. Have you Have you read about his minor league debut?
No, so there's one before the Tom Brenneman lore.
Yes, by like 10 years.
Oh no, what is this? What is this one?
So in the spring of 2011, I don't know if it was when he was making his minor league debut or if it was his first career minor league home run. The night that Osama bin Laden was killed, Nick Castellanos went yard.
No way.
Yes.
Wow. Man, that was that's early social media and Twitter. It was a crazy night anyways, but can you imagine today and the day you would have online, especially like John Cena announcing live on Raw that SEAL Team 6 got the job done, and it's like, yeah, that is insane.
Yeah, I think that made it even funnier that like 10 years before he started getting this reputation, somebody, I guess, went back and connected the dots. So like, oh yeah, by the way, he's been doing this since his very first professional home run.
Unreal. That is amazing. All right, we also have a list of the greatest 100 athletes since the year 2000. If I could pull it up. Patrick Mahomes, 18th. I'm just going to start naming people in front of him. And I want you to give me if he's already passed him and he should be higher, or if he'll pass him, give me a year.
Before you do that, does
Okay.
ESPN specify at all what they mean by greatest?
Yeah, there was some do you want me to read the whole thing?
If you have a Cliff Notes version, if it's too much, don't worry about it.
I can get there real quick.
Because yeah, I saw this. I was interested in it. The one I can't remember where he was ranked. The one that surprised me was Kevin Garnett. I think was like top 20 something, and he was a really good player, like no doubt, really good player for a long time in the NBA. I don't think of him as a top 20 something athlete across all sports in the last quarter century. And I'll also be curious once we talk about guys that are higher than Mahomes, maybe some of the most impressive people that he's listed above on this list. So I'd like to look at it both ways if you have the whole thing.
Actually, they don't give like a clear cut list of exceptions here. They do say at one point ranking the top 100 most accomplished athletes since 2000 wasn't quite so easy. So there is an accomplishment poll to it. That means, Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Wayne Gretzky are not included because it's just from 2000 to present.
Right. Okay.
And Jordan's stuff he played into the 2000s, but most of his career is previous to it. Same with Gretzky. They also say voters were instructed to consider only an athlete's performance since 2000. So, in the end, they received more than 70,000 votes from ESPN contributors to create our top 100. It seems like a lot of ESPN contributors. All right, so I'm going to list the people in front of Patrick Mahomes, and I want you to tell me if he's already passed him or if he will pass him, and give me like in 5 years and 2 years and 3 years, whatever it is. Shaquille O'Neal.
I would say he's higher than
4-time champion, 3-time Finals MVP.
Was Shaq ever considered the best player in the NBA at any point in his career?
Well, he was an MVP one season, yes.
Okay, that's not quite the same thing, but point taken. But still, I would say no. Like Mahomes is at a level now where he's number one, and then most people tell you there's a gap, and then there's the second tier. I don't know if Shaq was ever like that in the NBA, where it was like, this guy is clear-cut best player in the world, not just at his position, like period, and then there's nobody in his same tier, and then we talk about everybody else. So okay. I'll say Mahomes is higher.
Tim Duncan.
I'm going to contradict myself because Tim Duncan was never talked about that way. But Tim Duncan, well, one of those titles was before 2000. So I guess he had 4 in the 2000s.
Yeah, he's got 4 in the 2000s. Yes,
And they were dynastic.
two MVPs, 2-time Finals MVP, 13-time All Defense, 13-time All NBA.
See, my gut was to say that felt appropriate to have Duncan ahead of Mahomes based on how high of a level he maintained for as long as he did. But if I apply the same criteria as I did to Shaq, and even if you said 2 times Finals MVP?
Yep.
I mean, Mahomes is already 3 times Super Bowl MVP. So he doesn't have the longevity that Duncan has, but I would say his peak is already higher than Duncan's peak. So maybe it's a tie depending on how you weigh the longevity criteria, but I think you can make a case for Mahomes ahead of Duncan.
Katie Ledecky.
Okay, so this is tough because within her sport, within anybody operating in their own sport, almost nobody has been as dominant as Katie Ledecky. However, if she was swimming against somebody else who I know is on this list, Michael Phelps, she doesn't have any of those gold medals. So it's tough to gauge. Like, I would assume there are no players that are on here just from their college career, right? It's just professional. And that we understand there's a distinction between professional and college sports. I think there's also a distinction. Like, how do you judge a women's basketball player against Tim Duncan, for example? It's hard to do. So if it's just within the confines of women's sports or women's swimming, she is further ahead of her peers than almost anybody else is ahead of their peers in any sport. But I'm just not quite sure how to balance that.
Yeah, she's got 7 gold medals.
And world records.
21 World Championship gold medals. She has, in her specialty, I think it's the 50 free or something like that. She's got 14 of the top 15 all-time times.
That's unreal. See, and that would make me say, like, Mahomes, I could argue Mahomes has had the best, like, 6-year stretch, 5-year stretch of any NFL quarterback, that he's had, like, 2 of the very best seasons of any NFL quarterback. But he hasn't had 14 of the 15 best seasons of any NFL quarterback.
Right. Or games even. Well, yeah. Or games, yeah.
So it's tough. And, like, there's more competition. There's 32 NFL quarterbacks every year. She's in the pool with, like, 7 other swimmers at a time. I don't know. This one is hard for me. One of the funniest things I've ever seen on Twitter, though, was the 2016 Olympics. And you know the song with Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20 and Santana?
Sure.
And the guitar intro?
Uh-huh.
They started that song at the time Katie Ledecky touched the wall to finish the race. And the entire, like, intro guitar solo plays. And then the first line, Rob Thomas saying, "Man, it's a hot one," is like when the second place finisher touches the wall. She was that far ahead of everybody else. So this one is tough for me. I think you can make a case either way.
All right, Stephen Curry. 4-time NBA champion, 10-time All-Star. It doesn't have his MVPs, but he's won some MVPs, yes? He's got the only unanimous MVP season. Why do they not list his MVPs?
I may have an unpopular take on Steph Curry, who, if you looked at his total career numbers, it's all there. Championships, it's all there. Steph Curry got his first finals championship in a series against a team that the year prior had finished with the worst record in the NBA and drafted first. Now, they added LeBron James, traded for Kevin Love, all that. But Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love didn't play at all in that series. Kyrie Irving played less than 1 game in that series. And the Warriors won, 73 games that year? And I think, like, eked by LeBron and Matthew Dellavedova in 6. It's a pretty competitive series for the other team basically having 1 guy. Steph Curry was not Finals MVP that year. And then he teams up with
Andre Iguodala.
Kevin Durant, who at that time I think was the consensus second best player in the NBA, joins a 73-win team and they win 2 titles. Like, okay, congratulations. Steph Curry was not Finals MVP for either one of those, I'm pretty sure. He was only Finals MVP the 4th time. I think he was the best player on that first Finals team, but he wasn't the best in the clutch. I firmly believe, and I think there's data to support the fact that Patrick Mahomes is the most clutch player in NFL history. And so even though Curry has the longevity, the total career rings, if you're looking at the biggest moments and the postseason and the games that matter the most, I think Mahomes has shown up more than Steph Curry. I think I'm not going to call Steph Curry fraudulent, but if these legacies are built on how well you perform in championship series in the biggest moments, he did not really answer that question or rise to the occasion until his 4th finals victory. I think his 6th finals appearance, because they also lost to the Cavs one year. They lost to the Raptors one year. So I don't know if his legacy is as cemented as some of these other great ones that have these all-time performances in championship series and games.
I will say, I think the way people talk about Steph Curry, how he changed the game, is similar to how people will talk about Patrick Mahomes once Caleb Williams and Kyler Murray and all these guys are 10 years into their career, that they try to emulate Patrick Mahomes and the arm slot and all that. Even though he wasn't the first one doing it, I think people talk about him in the same way.
Same question, though. Was Steph Curry ever considered far and away the best player in the NBA where nobody else was even in his orbit?
Just the one season where he was the unanimous MVP. But I think when everyone talks about him, he's the best shooter of all time or the best shooter in the NBA. But I don't think anybody's saying he's the best player in the NBA.
Okay, I'll phrase it another way, too. Has there ever been a time since he became a starter that Patrick Mahomes wasn't viewed as the best player on his own team?
No, because in 2018 it was an MVP season and it was the best year he's had basically.
And the only reason he doesn't throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns every year like he did that year at age 23 is because, like you said, he changed the game and everybody started playing with 2 high safeties.
Right.
And then he adapted to that and won another MVP and won 3 Super Bowls. And so I think they both changed the game. I'm not trying to take away from Steph Curry in that respect, but I think there's something there when it takes to a finals series number 6 to be the MVP of that series, it's not the same as the most clutch player in NFL history. So I'll take Mahomes.
All right, let's run through some of these. Cristiano Ronaldo.
I honestly don't know. I don't follow soccer closely enough to.
So two stat points here. He's the 5-time Ballon d'Or winner, which I believe is the MVP of international soccer. He's got the record for most international goals too. So probably ahead of him, but here we are with Mahomes at 14.
I think that's fair too, because one thing I'll say about the sport Mahomes plays is there's no global contest for it. He doesn't have peers in Germany and England. Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, like obviously very good within their professional leagues, but then they go to like Euro Cup, World Cup type tournaments and then beat the best of the best from other leagues. And American football, you just don't have the opportunity to do. I mean, we could assemble the NFL like Pro Bowl team and go play the best Japan and Germany have to offer. Like, it would be a bloodbath, but
yeah. All right, let's skip these two because I similar to the soccer one, I just don't know if there's a direct comparison here. And they're at the end of their careers, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic. Just insane longevity and 20-plus Grand Slam titles. It's just 420 weeks at number 1. I mean, it's just it's a long list for those two guys.
It's also an individual sport, which is different.
Kobe Bryant.
I would put him ahead of Kobe. If you're willing to cast aside the longevity argument, I would put him ahead of Kobe.
Maybe ahead of Kobe for sure, with another title, another MVP, that kind of stuff. But you're putting ahead of him right now.
I mean, Kobe's first, he was not – he was a co-number 1 with Shaq. Took him a while to get back to, winning in the NBA Finals. So I think there's something to be said for how quickly Mahomes came out of the gates and was an MVP, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, all that. I mean, I think Montana was like the youngest player ever to get his third Super Bowl MVP at age like 31, 32. And, Mahomes did it at 28. So some of this is projecting out a little bit. Like if Mahomes maintains any semblance of the trajectory he's been on for another 6 or 8 years, he'll eventually pass these guys. But if we're looking at like peak performance in the 2000s, I think you could maybe still make the case for him over some of these guys that played longer.
Usain Bolt.
Again, tough because it's an individual sport, but like Bolt set the world record in like the race that they determine who's the fastest man in the world. So that one's hard to compare, to be honest.
Tiger Woods.
So I think Tiger got shafted on this because they didn't count, like most of his career was in the 2000s, but some of his most impressive victories were in the late 90s when he was really young and winning by, an insane number of strokes.
Yeah.
I think if they'd grandfathered in like the late 90s, Tiger should be like top 4 on this list probably. If it's 2000s only, how many majors does Tiger have in the 2000s?
They credit him with 13.
Okay, that's close. There's 4 a year, so you have more opportunities. So if you divide it by 4, he's at like 3 1/4. He has definitely been in that tier where you go, he is the best golfer in the world. There's nobody near him, and then we can talk about this other group. I'll give Tiger the edge, especially because I would count the late 90s, even though I know there's technically a cutoff on this. So I'll say Mahomes should be behind Tiger for now.
Have you seen the stat on Scotty Scheffler of how long he needs to be number 1 in the world to pass Tiger's streak?
I have not.
I think at this point it's like 450 more weeks.
So what is that, like 9 years in a row?
Yeah.
Basically.
Ridiculous. Yeah. Let's see. Another Simone Biles. We can just say Simone Biles and then move on. Roger Federer, another tennis guy, 20-time major champion, 369 major wins, 8 Wimbledon titles. That's a record. And then 103 tour singles titles, second most by any in the Open era.
I think it's also pretty remarkable. My only note on Federer is that he did that pretty much while Nadal and Djokovic were also in their primes. And really for all 3 of them, they all achieved what they did going against 2 of the other 3 best tennis players, of that generation. There's no layup or like, oh, I'll just avoid playing the best in the world to get this title or that championship. So tennis, very different sport, but I think all 3 of them, like if only 2 of them existed, I feel like you could split the other guys' majors in half and like give the other dudes 4 or 5 more. So pretty remarkable that we had all 3 of them at more or less the same time.
Yeah, and Andy Murray kind of gets jobbed because he's in there as the 4th with those 3 guys.
Yeah, that's tough.
Thomas Edward Brady III, number 5 on the list. Seven
Again, yeah, I forgot about that.
5-time MVP, Super Bowl MVP, 3-time NFL MVP.
Was he 5-time Super Bowl MVP?
So I think he wasn't the. He was the MVP the first one.
Yeah, when he threw for 137 yards.
And the second one was Deion Branch. And I think Malcolm Butler was the MVP in the Seattle one.
My stance on Brady, for the most part, is that everything you want to say about his legacy, not everything, a great deal of what you want to say about his legacy is because he played the game longer than anybody else. We kind of alluded to this with the whole Peyton Manning discussion, is when Peyton Manning retired, it was 4 rings to 2. Peyton had the MVPs, the All-Pros, the stats over Brady. And then like Manning retires. Some other guys kind of fall off. Brady wins several more rings, playing to age 44 or whatever he did. I mean, I guess you have to say Brady for now. I think that Mahomes has a slam dunk case for the better start to a career. I think he already has the case for a taller peak than Brady. But it's probably too early, and Brady's longevity is so exaggerated that, like, I don't know. A lot of Brady's records are because he played the game longer than anybody else. Mahomes already has records because he plays the game better than anybody else. He's already matched a lot of his playoff feats in terms of, like, again, those clutch moments, the double-digit comebacks. So here's a fun stat that I think people still undersell Mahomes on was how tough their path to the Super Bowl was last year. So Tom Brady won 2 Super Bowls, leading his offense to 13 points. Patrick Mahomes just won a Super Bowl against the highest collection of opponents faced and their season point differential in NFL history. He's won 2 Super Bowls with the 2 teams ranked 57th and 58th out of the 58 Super Bowl champions in terms of their defense and playoff points allowed per playoff game. Brady, I think, never won a Super Bowl with a defense ranked worse than 9th. And I think 4 of his 7 were with the top 5 or 6 defense. Mahomes won a Super Bowl with, I think the 12th ranked defense, the 21st ranked defense. So Mahomes has already achieved things in his career that Brady never did. 5,000-yard season with 50 touchdowns in the same year. Only other player to do that, I think, was Manning, maybe Breeze. I think there's only 2, and Mahomes is one of them. Mahomes, only player in NFL history to lead the league in passing yards, total yards, win regular season MVP, and win Super Bowl MVP. He's achieved things and holds records in his 20s that aren't because, I outlasted the other guys of my era, or, I played 5 seasons longer than anybody else you want to compare me to, so I just collected more completions and yards. He holds records and distinctions because he had games and seasons that are better than anybody else has ever had in the sport, including Tom Brady with, 22 seasons as a starter or whatever it was. So I realize and I am biased in this discussion. For most people, the discussion ends at Brady has 7, Mahomes has 3. Mahomes hasn't played long enough, and I get that. But I think there is some sort of case to be made.
And just a little context there on the 13-point victories in Super Bowls. Wasn't that the same Rams team that they beat 13-10 that Mahomes played on Monday Night Football? And it was 55-49 or something insane.
Yeah.
That's the Rams offense that scored 10 points in a Super Bowl against Tom Brady.
Yeah. Another thing that people point out is that Brady beat him head-to-head in the Super Bowl and another time in the playoffs. Fair points to make, I think. Some added context. The Chiefs weren't allowed to possess the ball in overtime of that game. Mahomes' defense screwed him twice once was the refs with a terrible roughing the pass call. The other was D Ford lining up offside. So those weren't moments that I look at and go had Mahomes played a little better in that game, maybe he would have beaten Brady head-to-head. It was the overtime rules, a bad roughing the pass call, and a defensive end lining up offsides, to me, doesn't say anything about Mahomes as a player. But I digress. Mahomes and Brady both won 2 Super Bowls in the years where they were both starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So one of them happened to be head-to-head in a COVID year where Brady's team was the home team. But I think if you zoom out a little bit, you would say neither one of them prevented the other from winning more Super Bowls than the other, because they started, 5 seasons, I think? Was this Brady's first, or 4, I guess?
Because Mahomes 22, yeah.
Well, no, because Mahomes has had 6 years as a starter, so 5 of those were as a starter when Brady was also starting. And in those 5 years, Brady won 2, Mahomes won 2.
Yep.
So, I don't know, people use the head-to-head Super Bowl to make it sound like Brady was so good that he prevented Mahomes from winning championships. the reality is they overlapped for 5 years and won the same number of Super Bowls. So I kind of reject that line of thinking.
Little trivia for you. Who was the last quarterback to beat Tom Brady?
Dak Prescott.
Dak Prescott. All right, LeBron James.
Yeah, I think you have to leave LeBron ahead. Very similar in that, like, LeBron was the fastest player or youngest player to 1,000 points, 2,000 points, 3,000, all the way to whatever he's at right now. So he has the longevity that Brady and some of these other people we've talked about have, Duncan. But he was also like that good out of the gates. He has the championships. He was in that tier, I think that Tiger Woods, Mahomes tier of like, he's number one. Everybody else can fight for second. Like there's no discussion. So yeah, I think Mahomes, like LeBron has the Mahomes peak covered plus, 10 years of insane production. So he's a guy I would say Mahomes is still chasing.
And then the top three, Lionel Messi, Serena Williams, and Michael Phelps.
So all three individual sports. It's really hard to argue Phelps with anybody.
Well, Lionel Messi's plays soccer. But.
Sorry, yeah. The other two, though. Serena Williams, I wouldn't say Serena Williams was as dominant in tennis as Katie Ledecky is in swimming. She has the longevity and all that, but like she was beatable. She was number one for sure at her peak, but she could be beaten. With Katie Ledecky and Michael Phelps, they were borderline invincible at their peak. It was like, I mean, hell, Phelps went 8 for 8, winning gold in Beijing. So I don't know if she was ever quite there, but I don't know. Swimming is a weird sport because I feel like you can replicate your performance on a pretty consistent basis. Same with track. Like once you're a 10 flat 100-meter runner, you can basically run 10 flat most times out. With tennis, there's so many other factors because like you're playing against a different opponent that maybe serves different, has a different playing style. So these are really hard to compare across sports.
Yeah, but I think we got Mahomes up to around 10th. And I think there's some movement if they do this list again in 10 years, 20 years, that Mahomes will be top 5.
I think so. I mean, I think he'll be, at the very least, he'll be what LeBron is to Jordan in basketball. He'll be that to Brady. I kind of think he already is, but there's also a case for a guy like Montana or, some others. But I don't know. He's going to have like, I don't know, probably top 3 all-time stats. Whether you want to look at Manning's records that were peak performance or Brady's records of longevity, Brees, same deal. I think he's going to be right in the mix with those 3. Plus, who knows how many titles and playoff wins and all that. I think if he wins, I think he's 1 game behind Montana for second place in playoff wins. So if he wins a wild card in a divisional game this year, he'll be second to only Brady in playoff wins at age 29. So stuff like that is pretty crazy when you think of like the foundation he's built for his legacy and what could happen over the next 10 or 12 years, what he could potentially add on to that.
There you go.
This is
all right.
Oh,
go ahead.
Were you about to close out the show?
No.
Okay. I was going to say it's an interesting timing on that because you and I, we set the 100 greatest tech football players list, but then every day when I go in to publish it, I like waffle for 30 minutes because every guy, it feels like now I'm underselling. We're at the point now where you're either an All-American or like NCAA record holder, the best player in the conference at your position one year. And it's hard. It feels like whoever you pick that day, you're kind of sliding because you feel like all of them should be higher, but it's a zero-sum game in that you can't have 45 guys in your top 20. So some of them have to be, 41, 42 days till kickoff. thankfully, to this point, there hasn't been a ton of responses like, "Oh, y'all are being so disrespectful to this guy. He's way higher." Well, I feel like the closer we get to number one, the more that's gonna be magnified. And
Sure.
but it's hard. Like I would challenge anybody that has an opinion on it. Like, come up with your own 1 to 100 list, and like you'll get to a point where you'll be at a section of like 15 guys, and you'll be like, I could pick any one of these in order for the next 15 days, and it would make sense. So anyway, I'm struggling with that, and it's tough.
All right. No, I did have a bit of a trivia game for you.
Okay.
All right. So I need you to tell me, Kyle, is the name I say a Texas Tech former football player or a signer of the Declaration of Independence?
Okay.
So with the political theme today, we're going to go, did they sign the Declaration of Independence or did they play football at Texas Tech? First name, Thomas Nelson Jr.
I'll say Texas Tech football player.
That is wrong. A merchant who was born on December 26, 1738 from Yorktown, Virginia.
See, I don't feel like there were a lot of juniors back then.
There's at least one. That's why I threw you off there.
Like it was more like John Adams, John Quincy Adams kind of stylization. So I don't know. That was a good one.
All right, so let's go Jim Neal.
I think he would have been a James back then if he was signing the Declaration of Independence. So I'll say Tech football.
Tech football from 1937 through 39.
See, I'm going to feel bad if I miss some of these guys that were Tech football players, but if they were from 1937, I'll probably not be too hard on myself.
Yeah, no, there's some names back here. All right, next name, Joseph Walter.
I'll say Declaration of Independence.
That is a Texas Tech football player. Joseph Walter from the 80s played in the NFL from 85 to 97 with the Cincinnati Bengals, his drafted team. I don't know where he played after that. All right, let's go. Next name, George Webb.
George, King George. I'll say Declaration of Independence.
Texas Tech football player.
How many guys signed the Declaration? This is part of my problems. I don't know how many signed it, and so if I knew that it was only like 8 or 12 guys, I might be a little more selective here. But
no, there's a bunch of names. All right, let's go Robert Morris.
Declaration of Independence.
That is the Declaration of Independence.
Let's go. Knew it.
Mac Percival.
Tech football.
Tech football. In the early 60s. Peter Owens.
Tech football.
Tech football. Lyman Hall.
Declaration of Independence.
That is the Declaration of Independence. You're on a roll.
I just need a little momentum. That's all.
Yeah. William Floyd.
Gosh, that one could go either way. I feel like if you were back then, decent shot that your name was William or George or John. I'll say Declaration of Independence.
That is the Declaration of Independence.
Let's go. He's on
All
a
right,
roll.
Carter Braxton.
Tech football.
Declaration of Independence.
Dang. Braxton didn't sound like a last name from back then.
No, and Carter, I guess, doesn't sound like a first name either, really. Let's see. Ed Mooney. I'm not going to say that one. That'd have been a layup. He was in the top 100, I believe.
I was hoping you'd give me a couple like Monte Ragers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well,
These are hard
there were a few that are like, especially, I was trying to find some from the recent days. Like James Hadnot could go either way. But obviously James Hadnot. Tech football.
Yeah, Tech football.
Let's go Thomas Howard.
Tech football.
Tech football. Played.
And I was going to contest that if you told me Declaration of Independence. I was like, I'm pretty sure we've also had a football player named Thomas Howard.
I did not cross-check that one. That could be a twofer. Nope, it's not.
That would have been insane homework on your part if you found somebody with or a name that fit both.
No. All right. I want to get you out here on a win. There was Robert Morris and Lewis Morris. So there's also a Morris here in the. All right, let's go. All right, a couple more here. I got two more here for you.
Okay.
William Whipple.
Tech football.
Declaration of Independence.
Dang.
Last one. Charles Jackson.
Oh gosh. This could go either way. I'll say Tech football.
Tech football ending on a win. 1987.
All right.
6'4" defensive back.
Oh, nice.
Charles Jackson. All right. Out of here on a win.
I think I got about half of those. I feel okay about that.
Yeah, I think you did. The Big Lubbock rewatched the 1987 Texas Tech TCU game today. Tech won 36-35. Billy Joe Tolliver, James Gray, Rodney Blackshear, and Tyrone Thurman. It's a big year.
That might have been a game where Billy Joe Tolliver set the single game passing record that wasn't broken until the air raid era.
I will say I went and looked up the record that Levi said earlier on the Iowa State record. You would take a guess on how many yards is the all-time Iowa State record for passing yards in a game?
So I was unclear. Is that what he meant, or did he mean that it was a Liberty Bowl record?
Ooh, maybe it was just a bowl game record. That makes more sense. It was a big number, though.
I'll say Iowa State's single game passing record is about 425.
It was 460 was in the bowl game, 460 something. Yeah. No, it was single game record for period.
What was the record before Becht broke it though?
So Becht threw 446 in the Memphis loss to Memphis. Can you name me the Iowa State quarterback from 2008?
08. Shoot.
I've never heard of this name.
2008. 08. No, I don't think
Austin
so.
Arnaud or Arnaud.
Yeah, Arnaud.
Yeah, 440.
I remember that now.
Todd Bandhauer, 437. Then you have Brock Purdy at 4th, 7th, and 9th, which is funny. Seneca Wallace at 5th, 425. The lowest threshold is 376 in 2011 by Jared Barnett.
I remember thinking, so when I was growing up, like part of why I was a, pseudo Tech fan was my youth group pastor was a Tech grad and a huge football fan and everything. And so he would tell me stuff about Tech football every now and then. And he told me Cody Hodges had 600 yards in a game or something. I was like, no way. I don't even get that in video games that I play.
Yeah. And
then I found the stat line. I was he had 80 pass attempts, 600 yards. I was like, what in the world is this offense?
Hunter Decker threw for 3,044 yards last year. Where does that rank all time in single seasons for Iowa State?
Number 2.
5.
Oh, shoot. Oh, he's number 2 in single season touchdowns, I'm pretty sure.
Excuse me, 4th. I was looking at Hunter Decker's. 4th, 31-20. He is 4th all time. Brock Purdy is number 1 all time and number 3 all time. I take a stab at number 2.
In what stat?
Single season passing yards.
So I thought it was Hunter Deckers.
So Hunter Deckers was 5.
Okay.
Brock Purdy 1 and 3. Rocco Becht is who I was trying to say at 4.
Is it Sam Richardson?
Seneca Wallace.
Oh, duh. Yeah, forgot about him.
Sam Richardson is number 9, for what it's worth.
Can you fact check me on, is Hunter Deckers number 2, or is Brock Purdy the only guy higher than Hunter Deckers in single season passing touchdowns at Iowa State?
Yeah, Rocco Becht. I said Hunter Deckers. We were talking about Rocco Becht, but yes, he's number 2.
Hunter Deckers?
No, Deckers is the quarterback that got popped for gambling.
Right, but he did play a full season before that. Maybe back past Deckers, but
no, Deckers is tied for 4th.
Behind who?
Purdy with 27, Becht with 23, Bandhauer with 20, and then Brett Meyer, Brock Purdy, and Hunter Deckers all have 19 touchdown seasons.
Gotcha.
Anyways, there's a little Iowa State history for you.
I think that was confusing because the entire time I was talking about Hunter Deckers and you were talking about Rocco Becht.
Well, it made it worse because I accidentally said Hunter Deckers when I was trying to say Rocco Becht.
Yeah. No, and you clarified, but I was still stuck on some Hunter Deckers factoid I was trying to. No, it's just bad communication.
Iowa State has 2 2,000-yard rushing seasons.
Brees Hall and Troy Williams?
Troy Davis.
Troy Davis.
Troy Davis and Troy Davis.
Oh, he has both of them.
Yeah. Brees Hall is number 3 at 1572. If anybody is like just sitting around thinking, what do dudes do when they're alone? This is all we do. This is I forgot we were even recording. This is me and Kyle just sitting around. Any of the picadors that are a part of our Patreon family, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos. If you're ever with us, this is what we're doing.
You know, you and I drove back from the Texas Bowl in Houston every bit of 8 hours, probably a little more, with Clint Scott. And for a section of that road trip, we went around, each of us naming one current or former Big 12 quarterback, like from any year, any school. And I don't remember how much time it ate up, but a significant chunk of that road trip, just being like, Chase Daniel, Brad Smith, Jamal Lord, Zach Robinson. And I think it got to the point where Clint Scott was just like making up names that sounded like generic. And we're like, oh, yeah, Austin Williams. And he was like, yeah, he was a quarterback for Kansas. We're like, okay, didn't know.
Yeah, that's and might I add, that was after you said you didn't like road trip games because you didn't know the kind of road trip games I brought to the table.
That's true. That's facts. There are picadors that think I am at best reluctant to admit that I was wrong, at worst incapable of admitting when I was wrong. I was wrong about what I thought we were discussing when you said road trip games, and fully acknowledge I was wrong in terms of how fun they can be to pass the time. So there.
Hey, that's all we need in today's climate.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Is people admitting they were wrong.
Clip that and put it on no context. I was wrong.
First time for everything. Okay, now I will wrap up the podcast. Final thoughts?
Final thought, I guess maybe one thing that stood out to me that I thought was cool this week was the video Texas Tech put out, voiceover by Byron, some say Hanspard, some say Hanspard, talking about Taj's chase for history. I thought it was really well done. Kind of mentioned this after Big 12 Media Days that I thought it was really cool that Joey and Taj and the team were embracing it, but to then have that kind of production created and put on social media, to have Hanspard's buy-in, willingness to do the voiceover, I think it's really cool. I obviously can't put myself in these shoes because I'm not a record-breaking athlete. I would think that if I were in Hanspard's shoes or whoever, I would definitely want the record for a certain amount of time, but I would like to think after 20 or 30 years, it'd be cool to see somebody break it while I'm still, alive to see it and appreciate it. I also wouldn't fault an athlete for saying, like, I want this record to be unbreakable. I don't want anybody to ever touch it. So I think it's really cool of Hanspard to kind of buy in. And, he was I would say subtly braggadocious. He was like, in the 30 years since I left, nobody's come close. I was like, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
But now he's, obviously willing to root on Taj as he pursues a school record for career rushing yards, outside shot at career scrimmage yards. So I thought that was cool. And like the footage they had of Bobby Cavazos, James Hadnot was stuff I had never seen before. And I've seen a lot of like David Collier's throwbacks, been through a lot of old game programs from the 50s and stuff. So to see that footage was really cool. And to have Handspar do the voiceover was really cool. So that'll be a fun thing to follow all season is, it's a team game and we keep score for a reason, but it's also fun to follow these individual storylines and kind of it's part of why sports gambling can be fun. It's like you don't care about these two teams, but you care about if one of them wins by 12.5 or not. And we all get to kind of watch Taj chase this record all season. So great job to the Texas Tech media team. And I'm just glad that we can talk about it openly and we're embracing this pursuit of history instead of like, hey, nobody jinx it and like quietly write on the back of a napkin like how many yards he needs the rest of the way out. They're just saying like, yeah, he needs this many yards. We're going to make sure he gets there, and that's that.
For what it's worth, Taj Brooks in the Texas Tech dynasty season I played finished with 350-plus carries in the regular season and over 1,700 yards, which works up to just over 6 a clip, and won the Doak Walker. They call it the Best Running Back Award. But unfortunately, Texas Tech fell in the Big 12 championship to Utah.
Oh, God, that would sting in real life.
In the national championship game to Alabama. Smoked Virginia Tech and NC State in the playoffs. Lost a close one to Alabama in the national championship game. Also lost to Arizona. Playing on All-American, by the way.
I saw a clip.
12-3?
You know what? I would take that right now.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I'm sure it would be painful to lose a national championship game to Alabama, but I think I would take that right now versus rolling the dice.
Yeah, a close one. And I think it was a touchdown game in the Big 12 championship game and the national championship game.
Yeah.
Arizona taught me quite a bit, but
a small part of me thinks that we might not make it all the way to the national championship game.
A small part.
So if you could assure me of that outcome right now, I think I would take it.
Also, for what it's worth, I think Taj had 28 touchdown runs. Would take that. Baron Morton. The one thing about me, Kyle, or about Baron Morton, not a great decision maker.
Gunslinger mentality.
Gunslinger mentality. I'm pushing it down the field. I did have more touchdowns than interceptions. I think I threw for 4,500 yards in the regular season. I didn't look after the national championship game. So Taj definitely eclipsed 2,000 in the playoffs. But I think I threw 32 touchdowns with Barron and 4,600 yards. But I had close to 30 interceptions too.
Jeez. I've loved seeing different clips or screenshots of Tech fans playing the game. I saw somebody win the Heisman with Morton. He had like 52 touchdowns, 6 INTs, like the best TD to INT ratio I've ever seen in my life. I saw somebody get like the hardest 12 yards I've ever seen with Taj Brooks, like stiff arms 4 guys to the ground. I was like, that actually looks like a Taj run from last year.
Yeah.
And then somebody made Micah Hudson like National Player of the Week. He had like 22 catches, 12 touchdowns.
Oh, so Micah Hudson in week 1 broke his toe out tore his pec.
Oh, jeez.
So I did not have Micah Hudson for the year. But Josh Kelly, 1,600 plus yards in the regular season. And double digit, 12 touchdowns maybe. Caleb Douglas, legit deep threat. So
love that.
Those are the things you know about Texas Tech through one season.
Hey, good reminder. We just got done previewing the wide receiver position, including Caleb Douglas, Micah Hudson, Josh Kelly. that the entire position preview series is going to be available exclusively on our Patreon, which you can join for $5 a month. We've had a bit of a technical glitch. If you joined within the last week or two and you haven't been sent a link to the Discord, reach out to us either through Patreon or maybe on Twitter or something. Patreon's kind of glitching it. We'll get you the Discord link if you don't have it yet. But you'll also get access to our Wednesday episode, which is where we'll preview all of these position groups. We did wide receivers last week. Coming up, no, is that right? Yeah, we did wide receivers last week. Coming up this week, we've got linebackers and the star position bundled as one group. So we'll do that on Wednesday during the Patreon episode. Hope you all will join us, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos.
All right. That's all I got.
Same here. Love y'all.